Hey guys. It feels good to be back.
Welcome to season 2 of what has been the worst idea you've ever had.
Or the best idea.
And that is watching our podcast.
Well, that went poorly. I guess for those who haven't watched, this is a podcast with Jay Buston and myself, which is Matt Lane. We just kind of talk about gaming stuff or nerd stuff. I mean, it's really whatever. It's mostly gaming stuff, but we kind of just talk about whatever we feel like talking about, especially with what this episode is going to be. There ain't no freaking telling where this is going to go.
Yeah, buckle your seatbelts, boys and girls, because this one's going to be a bumpy ride.
Buckle your pants. Buckle your pants.
No kidding.
Now, there's a reference that not a whole lot of people are... Okay, moving on.
I don't know, but Battle Block Theater is a pretty well-known game.
You would think, but I've learned never to assume, because you know what they say about... Okay.
Are you assuming that I know what people say about assuming things?
How dare. Boy, we are never going to get anything accomplished.
No.
Today's video or podcast... I always say video, and I don't know why. I'm just used to doing it after years of Let's Plays, I guess.
Right.
It's hard to get that out of my head. Today's podcast is going to be about a very generic topic. There's going to be a lot of things that go into this, but we're going to talk about E3.
Yes.
Now, just to throw it out there, just to be honest about it, I missed watching it live. I've watched a few replays of it and some highlights and stuff, so I have like a general idea of what went on. Jay, however, actually got to watch a good bit, if not the whole thing, so I'm going to kind of let him take the helm on this one, and we're just going to kind of take this horse wherever it goes.
Yep, as this is our first episode back, we're going to let this one just run as it runs. No time necessarily on it. It will be a little different about the time in the later episodes, but we'll get to that bridge when we cross it. For now, E3 just finished yesterday, actually, at the time of this recording, so it's still very fresh in our minds. I know by the time you get it, it'll probably be at least a week gone. But yeah, because this will probably come out, Wednesday? If you turn it around by then, so maybe 2 weeks, I don't know.
It just depends.
Yeah.
I don't know. Never date the video, man.
Yeah, I know. I broke like one of my most sacred rules. I hate dating videos, but it is what it is. Because E3 is a dated thing.
Which we have broken that rule multiple times, but...
True. So anyway, basically there are 6 press conferences at E3. You have EA, Microsoft, PC Gaming, Ubisoft, Sony, and Nintendo. And they each get up and they talk about their games or their consoles or whatever it is that they're going to talk about for about an hour, hour and a half, or if you're Nintendo, 25 minutes. And that's E3. And it gets you really excited about new games or new consoles, new ideas, things like that, new partnerships. And so the first one, the show that kicked everything off was EA. And I could not pick a better press conference to start with because they set the bar so incredibly low. How can you fail? It's EA.
I was waiting to see where that was going to go.
No, it's EA. It's exactly what you expect it to be. I love making fun of EA because they just don't change anything year to year.
What did they do this? Just give me a rundown because I haven't seen anything on EA.
That's fine.
E3.
What EA does every year is they spend a good amount of time talking about their sports division, EA Sports, which is rightfully so because it's a big division. A lot of people are into NBA, 2K series, Madden, FIFA, things like that. Those are very popular games, and I know that a lot of mainstream gamers aren't necessarily into sports games, but you have to recognize that they are very popular.
Right.
So they spend a lot of time doing that, and they always bring in like a celebrity, like obscure soccer player no one's heard of. And they also like over dramatize like the story mode in a sports game.
No one cares.
Yeah, and like I play a little bit of sports games, not much, but like I don't care about the story mode or like the drama in it necessarily. It's not like, oh no, coach, the world's gonna end if we don't win the game today.
No, it's speaking from someone, because me and Jay have played games, including sports games, a good bit,
Right.
and I'm someone that I'm kind of a weird mix. I'm very much into sports. I'm very passionate about sports, and I do play a few sports games. I do not care if a sports game has any sort of story. That is completely irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, a campaign is fine, but story is unnecessary.
Here's what a campaign for a sports game should be. It should be you with whatever team you like to play, and you have the ability to play a whole season and try to be as good as you can be. But no story behind any of it other than how you're doing. Like, no drama. Like, that's just stupid.
Yeah, no, it's a waste of time. And then the other thing that EA, we're going to kind of just run through things briefly. We might dedicate whole episodes to these things later, but we just kind of wanted to talk about these on a very surface level thing. The other thing that really confused me about EA is that they came out and at the very beginning, the first thing they mentioned at their press conference was Star Wars Battlefront. Because that's the big thing. That's been the most anticipated topic from EA for like a year now.
Right.
And that, Star Wars Battlefront 2 specifically. And they were like, we're going to talk about Star Wars Battlefront 2. We're going to have a half hour of like dedicated, unbroken game footage, just like straight from the game itself, from the players down on the floor. And we're going to get right into that. And then they went from talking about getting right into Star Wars Battlefront to talking about Madden. And I was very confused. And then they didn't even touch Battlefront until the very end of their hour-and-a-half press conference. And I was really, because they seemed like, I guess they were introducing what their press conference was going to be about, but it seemed like they were like, all right, Star Wars Battlefront, let's go.
So
Tom Brady.
What you're saying is that EA essentially just did a verbal version of clickbait?
Yeah, basically.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. Now, that being said, Star Wars Battlefront 2 looks good. I mean,
we talked about that in some previous episodes, and even
I was drunk for most of those, so
Jay literally remembers 0 of the first 10 episodes we did. I had to remind him that we even did podcasts.
I'm just taking your word for it at this point.
I mean, given as it's hard to really explain how I feel about the first one, and I know Jay has it too, and we've played it a little bit because like it's not a bad game.
No, not at all.
At all. It's just there was something about it.
It's super hollow.
Yeah, there was something about it that just didn't keep bringing you back to it. Like once you did it a few times, even with playing with friends, like I know me, Jay, and a friend of ours named Zeronium played a few times, and even with having that and you having fellowship with other friends and stuff, like there's not a whole lot to pull you back to it outside of the first couple of weeks. Which is weird because the first Star Wars Battlefront on like the PlayStation and the Xbox, specifically PlayStation 2, was just groundbreaking, and like I will still play that game for hours.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, and me and Jay talked about this a little bit before we started recording, that I was kind of curious if they were going to bring the original mode back on this one, which I still don't think we've seen an answer for that.
I didn't see anything about it, but I also skimmed through EA's. So
right now, if they brought that back, I think that would fix that specific thing. I think that would bring a lot, because that's all the first game was. So if you had people that would play that for hours and hours and hours and not get tired of it, then why the heck would you get rid of it?
Yeah. And what I think is also important to mention about Battlefront is the story. And I know we just spent a long time knocking EA for having a story in sports games, but for Battlefront, but in Battlefront, the story is appropriate. And that's what a lot of people were clamoring for. In fact, they even flat out had this montage on screen of all of these tweets that they've gotten, most of which were not worded very friendly, regarding the lack of a story mode in Star Wars Battlefront 1. Or the newest one that's not out yet. The latest reboot, I don't know. Star Wars Battlefront for the PS4 and Xbox One. And so they spent a long time talking about the story in this one, and it's really interesting without going into too much depth of it. But basically this game will, in the same way that Rogue One kind of tied the gap between episodes 3 and 4 of Star Wars, the movies, they were like, we didn't want to just recreate a movie as a video game. We've all seen the movies 1,000 times. We can quote them by heart. So what we did is we created a whole new story that takes place between episodes 6 and 7 at the end of Return of the Jedi and beginning of
Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens. Thank you. The Force hits snooze. And so it's a brand new story. There'll be familiar characters that we all know and love, but they also said there will be some new characters, which means they're all gonna die. That's the thing. Because when you're watching Rogue One, you know every single one of those characters is gonna die because they're not in episode 4.
Oh yeah, I still don't. My wife just will argue me till I'm blue in the face that she did not feel that way. Like, no, some of them will make it. I'm like, no. Why would you think that?
No, they don't make it. The entire, you're meeting these characters and you're like, they're all dead.
Yep.
So sorry, you might want to put something on screen about spoilers for Rogue One before we start talking about that.
That should not even be noted as if you've seen any of the Star Wars, there's no reason it should be a doubt in your mind how that movie's going to end.
Well, fair enough. So anyway, that was EA in a nutshell. Very disappointing in general. They really banked on Battlefront drawing a lot of hype, and fair enough, it did draw a fair amount of hype, but sports games don't really change much year to year, but they always come out and saying it's new, it's innovative, we've rebuilt it from the ground up, and I'm like, no, you haven't. Nothing's changed.
EA, you've never done any of that. EA is just a bunch of ridiculous. EA reminds me. This is gonna be a weird. It reminds me of kind of how Microsoft was during the original Xbox days.
In what way?
Give me more money. Give me more money. Give me more money.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Do you disagree?
No, I do not disagree at all.
But there was no reason to. I still remember when I first started working at GameStop and the 360 was still fairly new at that point. Mm-hmm. And even those days it had calmed down a little bit, but there was still so much crap that a bunch of people just come in and just brainwash out the wazoo, talking about Microsoft crap. And I'm like, dude, this is just, there's no reason for you to be paying for this.
Well, speaking of Microsoft, they were up next. And the big thing, what Microsoft needed to do going into E3 2017 was give people a reason to buy an Xbox. All right, Matt and I have spent a long time talking about, I think episode 9 or 8 or something we did was all just about Microsoft versus Sony, more or less.
Specifically the Xbox One. There's
specifically the Xbox One versus the PS4.
It's kind of crazy to think. There's still plenty of reasons to buy an Xbox 360 if you wanted one for old consoles. It's outdated, but there's still plenty.
Well,
it's a good vintage console to keep.
Yes and no, and we'll get there. But Microsoft, they needed to give you a reason to buy an Xbox One. And I believe they accomplished that this year. And there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, they showed off Project Scorpio, which going into it, I kind of liked the name. I'm like, this is cool. It's getting away from Xbox's really stupid naming schemes.
Right.
And then they changed the name.
Oh, good.
Do you know what they changed it to, Matt? I know you haven't seen everything yet.
I don't, and now I'm just sad because that was actually a cool name.
I know. They changed it to the Xbox One X. So when you abbreviate Xbox One X, it spells Xbox.
Oh my gosh.
It's so stupid.
Just when I think that they can't do something more freaking dumb,
yep,
they go and do it.
No, whoever's in charge of naming things over at Microsoft needs to be fired. I understand these people work hard or whatever, but this person, if it's the same person who named the Xbox One, they need to be let go. I'm sorry, but they are not doing their job well. And I hope that you get another job and get back on your feet because the economy blows. But, you are not good at your job, sir or ma'am, and you need to find another career path. That was really harsh.
And needed.
Yes.
Let's be honest.
They announced several things about the Xbox One X, and they wanted to keep pushing and they kept saying, we wanted more. We wanted to give you more. We wanted to do more with this. And so the things that they really pushed are, the CPU, all the RAM in it, the graphics card in it. It's the strongest console that's ever been built. And that's an unarguable fact. It is a very powerful console. It's a great console. They definitely expanded their library of games. They did say we're going to be showing off like 44 or 43 new games, 22 of which will be exclusive. However, Microsoft's version of exclusive means that it will also be out on PC.
Correct.
So there's that.
And that's
I would
that's
say
what we talked about a lot in episode 9 is
right
for the Microsoft people, like what makes you want to buy the console if you can play the games on PC.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that Xbox did with their console now that I think gives you a viable reason to buy an Xbox, one, they expanded their game library, certainly. But two, not only is the Xbox One backwards compatible with the Xbox 360, but you can also play original Xbox games on it now. So it's essentially 3 consoles in one.
All systems need to be doing it at this point. Like it's kind of ridiculous not to anymore. To me,
yes and no.
To me, I understand from a business aspect, like it makes perfect sense. Just from a gamer perspective, you just kind of want them all to be that way because otherwise it gets annoying to when you hit, especially if you're like me and I know you're the same way to where you like to have physical copies instead of digital. It gets kind of annoying because lot of I know PlayStation specifically, like they're like, well, it is 100% backwards compatible. You can buy any PlayStation game ever digitally. I'm like, but not a lot of people necessarily want it digitally. Some people want the physical copy.
Right.
And you can't do that on all of them, but that's a good thing, because I think that's good for collectors.
Yeah, and why would you want to rebuy it anyway? Like if the PS5 comes out, I don't want to rebuy my PS4 collection digitally.
Correct.
So I would keep my PS4. I would not trade it in for that reason.
Exactly.
But there's pros and cons for backwards compatibility for sure. But so as I was watching this conference, I actually thought to myself, the Xbox One X is actually not that bad sounding of a console at this point. It's the 4K, the HDR, all that stuff. It's beautiful images being shown off from this console. The one thing, and they didn't learn from their mistake a few years ago, the one thing that's going to push this away is the price tag. It's $500.
Again, like I just keep thinking that they're going to learn.
No. And I don't get me wrong. This isn't like you get a lot for this. It's basically 3 consoles because you can play all your Xbox and Xbox 360 games. It's insanely powerful. If you were to build a PC with the same specs of an Xbox One X, you'd probably spend more than $500. Just to be fair and honest. But the law of consoles is you sell the console for a loss, you make the money up in software. And this to me just tells that even though they announced 22 exclusive games for the Xbox One X, they have no faith in the ability to sell the software to make up for the hardware.
That or their greed just knows no bounds.
Well, there's that. But one more positive twist I did want to put on Microsoft's press conference was a game that we had covered here in the past called Sea of Thieves. It's by Rare. I liked their trailer for it. Rare now looks very different than Rare 20 years ago, like the team that made Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie, et cetera, et cetera. But as a core, they've stayed pretty similar. They're still very like a goofy company. If you go watch the E3 2017 Sea of Thieves trailer, there's a lot of humor in it, and it's very funny. And the game itself also looks great. When I watched the trailer for when we originally did the research on this game for the first time we talked about this game in season 1, I was sold on it. And then they re-showed the trailer again. They showed a new trailer, and I'm even more excited about it. I'm just really glad it's coming out on PC because I'm not buying an Xbox One X to play this game. So it'll be on PC.
I love that you refer to it as season 1.
Well, I mean, essentially, I figured just for naming sake,
just because,
yeah.
To give because I know we give Microsoft a hard time a lot, but to give them a compliment, one of the things that I've always thought, at least from personal experiences, that I always give Microsoft the upper hand or the award to is their servers. in comparison. Now, I don't know how it's gotten now because I never bought an Xbox One because I never saw a reason to. But back in the previous gen when it was 360 and PlayStation 3, if I was going to play games with my friends online, typically I would always play it on Xbox 360 because their servers just had a better, more stable signal.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was about Sony around then. They just had a lot more dropping issues.
Well, Sony's... I didn't have a PS3. Wasn't their service initially free?
That's what I was going to say. It was free, so I imagine when they changed it into 4 and actually paid for it, they might have had a little more of a budget as far as to make it better. I don't really know how the inner workings of all that goes, but that would be my assumption. But that being said, Microsoft, at least during that phase, always had a lot better servers, so that would be something that did pull me to that console back in that day.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, it used to be a problem, I think, that's gotten better across the board. I know people with an Xbox One, and I've never heard anyone complain about online gaming, about things being dropped, whatever. So Microsoft still has very solid servers, and they even use their Xbox Online, or whatever it's called, Xbox Live, is how you play their games on PC as well. So it's the same servers, and so they're very strong and they do well. Sony has also had great servers. I've had a PS4 for almost 2 years now. I don't think I've ever had a bad online experience.
Oh, neither have I.
With all the games I've ever played. And both of those companies give you rewards for being like online members. Like I just got a free copy of Life is Strange because I'm a PS Plus subscriber. So.
Right. Now, another thing I'll add to that, though, it is kind of hard to take people at face value when they say that Microsoft servers are terrible now or Sony servers are terrible now, because a lot of people don't, and I don't want to call people stupid, but for whatever reason, there's a large amount of people that don't seem to understand that your internet plays a huge part in that.
Absolutely.
So there's plenty of people, even people that I know personally, that will bash the crap out of some server, and I go talk to them and realize that they have 6 megabytes or lower a second. And I'm like, what? I mean...
In all fairness, you guys just got internet in Mississippi like, what, 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
I got mine yesterday.
Well done, sir.
This sounds great.
We're going to keep moving here. We're going to launch into PC gaming was the next show. That one was a wash. There really wasn't anything that stood out to me. They talked a lot about, like, it was powered by Intel. And so Intel spent a long time talking about their newest CPU and all that stuff. If you're a PC gamer, now I'm a PC gamer to an extent, but if you're like a hardcore PC master race kind of guy, then maybe this meant a little bit more to you. To me, a lot of the games that they showed off are on console too. Like they talked about Skyrim. Skyrim was talked about at every single press conference except EA's. And I'm not even exaggerating that. Like literally, they talked about Skyrim at Microsoft's, PC's, Ubisoft's. No, sorry, not Ubisoft. Sony's and Nintendo. So 4 out of 6 press conferences, Skyrim was shown off. Skyrim is 6 years old. Put the game to bed. But yeah, the PC gaming show was not much of an interest to me. Nothing really jumped out. They did talk about PlayerUnknown's Battleground a little bit, but that's also coming to console, so I don't know. It is what it is. PC gaming, I love you, but your press conference was a little lackluster. Although it was the most casual and laid back, and I did enjoy listening to it the most, I will admit. So there's that. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to add to that, or should we just move on to Ubisoft?
I mean, I don't really know, like, as far as PC, like, I've always kind of wondered, like, what you even really do at a press conference, because a lot of it seems weird to say, because I know some people still want to see a visual representation, but a lot of PC people are your more hardcore, like, it's very hard to have casual PC gamers.
Yeah, you're not going to have a casual PC gamer with, like, a 1080i and an i7, you know?
Yeah, so that being said, like I feel like the majority of your clientele kind of know what to expect, and so I don't really know what you do there. Whereas, you know, console people, you can have plenty of just casual people that don't keep up with anything. But I mean, I'm sure there's still stuff you could do, but I would not be one of those people that I'd be looking for a specific something for a PC launch. Now, granted, I don't have the PC like you do, but I mean, would you be looking for something specific from a PC at E3?
The only thing that I would look for from PC at E3 would be announcements from Steam specifically, and not to be that guy, but things like Half-Life 3. That's all I would look for. Which
you're that guy.
Half-Life 3 isn't going to happen. All right, I'll go on record as saying that, because at this point, people's expectations are just way too high that everything that could ever possibly come out will be a disappointment.
Yep, it could be the best game ever, and it'd still be a disappointment.
Oh, I forgot about a press conference, Bethesda, and there's a good reason why I forgot about Bethesda's press conference. It literally put me to sleep. I'm not exaggerating that. It wasn't that it was bad. It was just lackluster as get out. Now, they did this cool little tropey thing where they were like, welcome to Bethesda Land. And it was like a theme park. And you would go to different parts of the theme park and they'd talk about, Fallout 4 VR, which virtual reality is not my cup of tea. The only game I've ever thought might be fun to play in VR would be Portal. That kind of seems like it might be okay. But like if I'm playing Fallout, I don't want a friggin' box strapped to my head of virtual reality nonsense. I don't want it.
It's really funny because I remember having a conversation with a couple of my friends that were talking about VR being the future of gaming, and eventually that'll be pretty much all anyone want to do. And every time I'd be like, I don't really see that happening.
No.
It's a cool thing to have an option to do every now and then, but kind of like you said, it's not. It kind of defeats the purpose because it's making the game a little too real, and that's kind of the opposite of what you want to. Like, the game is an escape of reality. It's not supposed to feel like everyday life necessarily. Now, there are exceptions to that,
right?
But it's just one of those things that's not what I want in every single game. I may do it every now and then, but like you said with Skyrim, I wouldn't want to do that. Like no. I just want to go play Skyrim.
And that was the other thing in Bethesda. They talked about Skyrim. They talked about Elder Scrolls Online, and that's when I fell asleep, literally. And I went back and I kind of looked over the notes from the press conference, and I was like, nothing at all about this conference stood out. And I hate to say that because I love Bethesda, but like they're at a point right now where they can't announce any new games because they're a long way off from any Elder Scrolls game. And they just released Fallout pretty recently, so they're even further off from that. And you don't want to have No Man's Sky syndrome where you announce a game 5 years before it's ready, and then you bring it to the next E3, and then you bring it to the next E3, and then you bring it to the next E3, and then you bring it to the next E3, and say, this game will finally come out and give a date, and then you delay that date, and then the game finally comes out, and people are like, well, I've been hyped about this game for 5 years, and now I'm disappointed with it. So Bethesda's obviously not announcing any new titles for their main series right now because they're still a far way from coming out. I'm talking at least 3 years. We won't hear anything new from Bethesda, from Fallout or maybe an Elder Scrolls game, but it seems like they're putting a lot of their eggs into Elder Scrolls Online. So,
well, I mean, you got to be real careful with, which I mean, it's kind of exactly what you were saying with games like Fallout or Elder Scrolls. You don't want to pull an Assassin's Creed and do one every single freaking, sometimes two within a year, because then you kind of defeat the purpose. Where the reason that they're so good and so sought after, not only because they're good games fundamentally, but they give a good, comfortable breathing room in between them, there where not only is it a noticeable difference in just being a better made game, but graphics are typically better because of how big of a gap they give.
Yep.
Just quality in general, bugs are either more contained by that point. You might still have them, but it could be in a different format, or they give enough room to where it's enough to where even though it might be a similar layout, it feels like a different game.
Yeah.
And that's to me a smart business move.
Well, speaking of Assassin's Creed, next on the docket was Ubisoft, and sure enough, they did come out with a new Assassin's Creed game, which everyone kind of saw coming, because they took almost 2 years off of the series, which was a smart move. They said, like, we're going to take some time away from Assassin's Creed to rethink it, to, do whatever. And I hope that we will start seeing more time between an Assassin's Creed title, because the market is definitely oversaturated.
Way oversaturated. Like, good gosh, they're getting on Guitar Hero levels here.
Yeah. Or Call of Duty. But that being said, Assassin's Creed Origins looks like a solid game. It's very different. It's pretty different from titles in the past. You have this thing where you interact with an eagle, and that allows you to kind of, it adds a different dimension to the gameplay. The combat system has been, and I can actually say this because they actually did it, completely redone from the ground up. And that was always one of my biggest gripes in Assassin's Creed, is that the combat was always kind of awkward. It looks a lot smoother. Yeah, it was very janky. It looks a lot smoother this time around. And honestly, I might give this game a shot. I don't know. We'll see. Play of it. Well, I doubt I'll do a Let's Play of it, but I'll probably stream it over on twitch.tv/Let'sJays.
Everybody spam Jay on Twitter. Come out of retirement.
No. So then the other titles that Ubisoft showed off, they did more on the South Park game. Which looks good. It looks funny. I loved Stick of Truth. I'm looking forward to the Fractured Butthole.
I won't play it, but I'll definitely watch it.
It's fun. And then Far Cry 5 looks great. Far Cry 4 was a fantastic game, and Far Cry 5 looks even better. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting game. There's a whole lot that can be said about it. We could spend at least a whole episode on that alone. For that reason, I'm not going to say anything more on it, but it looks good. And then they also announced Mario Rabbids, or whatever the name of that game is. The Mario crossover with Ubisoft's Raving Rabbids series.
Because I watched a short little update on that, and it was one of the creators saying, we just wondered to ourselves, what would happen if we added rabbits to the Mario universe? And like the second he said that, just clipped to a different clip of someone on fire just screaming, just I'm like, well, that's about accurate.
They basically took the game XCOM and turned it into a Mario game. It's a top-down turn-based strategy game combat style thing. It looks really interesting, and as an added bonus, Grant Kirkhope did the whole soundtrack for it. So I honestly, when they first leaked this game ahead of E3, I was like, this is the dumbest looking thing in the world. After seeing the gameplay of it, I'm kind of sold on it. I like it way more than I expected to, and I'm almost mad at them for that. It's like, this game has no right being this appealing. But sure enough, it is. Hitting the final stretch here, we had two more conferences, Sony and Nintendo. I can sum up Sony in one word, and that's a shadow. It was a shadow of their former selves. It was not a good press conference. It was very visually appealing. Like, they had like a waterfall on stage, and they had like a Middle Eastern music group kind of doing a live music rendition along with the trailer for The Last of Us, not The Last of Us, Uncharted DLC. Mm-hmm. And that looked good. And then they talked a little bit about, what's that game that you've been playing on PlayStation 4? Horizon Zero Dawn.
Horizon Zero Dawn. They have a DLC.
They talked about DLC for that. Yep. Very little about it or whatever. And they kind of hit like a couple of really good titles, and then they pulled way back and didn't really talk about anything appealing, except like Shadow of War was kind of in there, and Shadow of the Colossus is being redone. So like a couple of exciting things here and there. It's the third time Shadow of the Colossus has been released now.
People eat that crap up, man.
It looks beautiful, don't get me wrong, but like at the end of the day, you got to bury it with a shovel and just like let new game, like, make room for something new and exciting, and not just re-releasing the same thing over and over again, which is what frustrates me about Nintendo, is they just keep re-releasing Wii U games onto the Switch, but we'll get there in a minute. But then at the very end of Sony, they did show off the Spider-Man game, which first got revealed a year ago at their conference at E3, which looked good. But now it just looks like QuickTime Events, the video game, and I'm not really interested in it, if I can be honest with you. It's just like, it's very cinematic, and so it looks really smooth and fun or whatever, but it's just like there is combat to it and like you do whatever, but then like once you activate a certain event, like the crane is falling on the city, it's going to kill everyone unless you press triangle now. Square again, R1, left joystick. All right, you did it. It's like, and I don't have a solution for that. There's no better way to do it other than just to not do it. Like, make it a cutscene. Don't make me have to press buttons to it. I don't know. But overall, Sony did not do as well as they could have done, and certainly did not do as well as they've done in years past. But that's that.
See, I've never necessarily had too much of a problem with that kind of layout in games, as long as I know it's coming. I don't remember what game it was, but I had a problem with a specific game because it would go back and forth on cutscenes to where sometimes you did have to push buttons and sometimes you didn't. And that I didn't care for, because that I was always having to like pay real close attention to see if a button was about to come up, and then sometimes the whole cutscene would happen and not a single time you'd push it, and I'm like, well, dadgummit.
Yeah, like
I might have missed something.
Once you're done with like a particular sequence, there's just something therapeutic of like putting the controller down and just being like, whoo, and just like watching the cutscene play out. But
right, but if it's a whole game and it's something there's not necessarily ridiculous sequence before that happens, and you constantly know that's how they're going to be, then to me they're not that bad. But I can understand how some people, it wouldn't be their cup of tea.
Yeah. So wrapping up press conferences was Nintendo, who had, once again, a very interesting way of doing things. Their spotlight was rumored to be 35 minutes long. It was closer to 25. And they didn't show off anything too groundbreaking, but that's kind of par the course for Nintendo. Like you knew they were just going to talk more about Mario Odyssey. They were just going to talk more about the DLC for Breath of the Wild. They were just going to talk about Pokken Tournament. They were going to talk about ARMS, which just came out. They're going to talk about, things like that. But then they dropped a bomb that Metroid Prime 4 is in development. And also that a full-size Pokemon RPG is coming to the Switch in the future as well. And they just like casually threw those things down and then proceeded to talk about all the other stuff that we already knew a bunch of stuff about. It was really weird. And then they went into 2 days of Nintendo Treehouse, which is just where they show games. So we got to see a ton of gameplay of Mario Odyssey. Like Nintendo showed off more gameplay than any other press conference combined. It's, when you see like a thing for Far Cry 5, it says like, like actual gameplay shown in engine, and it's just cutscenes. Like there's no one's actually sitting there with a controller playing the game. But Nintendo does that. They have people, sometimes the developers of the game, up on stage talking about it, playing it. So we got to see hours of footage from Mario Odyssey and Splatoon 2 and ARMS and Pokken Tournament. And that was really cool. And then between press conferences or between games, they would bring out surprises. So they'd be like, oh, also we're making another Metroid game for the 3DS. And it's a remake of Metroid 2 or whatever it is. The Return of Samus or whatever it is. And that looks really cool. I'm not a Metroid person. I've never played a single Metroid game, but the games look good. And then they talked about Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga being remade and adding a whole new game onto that. And so Nintendo had kind of a different way of doing things, but they announced and showed off way more than any other company did.
Which is good. I can't remember the last time that Nintendo was the head runner of everything of E3.
3 years ago.
Well, like I said, I haven't watched a whole lot of them, so for me, it's not even in a memory.
Yeah, no, it was certainly, like, they came out, like, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and they just completely ran the show. Like, they just dropped great game after great game after great game. And they've kind of been, like, a contender ever since, but I think if I had to rate E3, I think I'd probably give Nintendo the victory on this one. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Nintendo fanboy. Just to show you, like, my loyalties. Like, I don't have an Xbox, and I have a PS4. I would give Microsoft a way higher score than I gave Sony this year. So,
which, I mean, I've heard that from a lot of people that watch the E3, that they said it was a weaker year for Sony.
Yeah, it certainly was. So anyway, that was E3. That's certainly our take on it. I'm curious as to what you guys think about it, either about a game specifically, about E3 as a whole. We want to know your thoughts on it. So, of course, as always, leave us your nonsense in the comments below, and we'll have John read them and tell us which ones are worth reading.
Yeah, just keep having this dadgum cough.
That's why I have Gatorade.
I try. Just put whatever you want in the comments about E3 specifically. Just kind of like Jay said, if you thought a specific console did really well and why, more importantly, because like we kind of want to get the conversation going as opposed to just saying like, yeah, this was great, like cool, but why?
Yeah.
I want to see what your actual thoughts are, because that's probably the funnest part about doing these, is seeing the comments and getting an actual discussion going and stuff like that. So if you put something, man, just go to town with it. Let us know what you thought, and we'll definitely bounce that off of you. But that's all I got for this episode. It's good to be back. We took a little bit of a break off just to give ourselves a break and to let the industry kind of catch up so that we would have a lot more room of stuff to talk about. We didn't want to bleed through.
We've got a lot more room of stuff to talk about in the coming weeks, let me tell you.
Which is good, because at the end of, our last episode, we still had plenty of stuff we could, but we saw kind of a glimpse of the end of the tunnel if we kept going at the rate we were going.
Yeah.
So we're like, we need to kind of slow down a little bit, like let it catch up to itself.
So we do have a little bit of a new format. Tune in next week to find out what that is.
We will start with the new format next week. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. As always, leave a comment, like we said earlier. Like, comment, and subscribe for anything about anything. And Jay, you got any closing remarks?
No, I'm good. I couldn't come up with something sarcastic off the top of my head. I'm very tired, so.
And that's Jay failing with the sign off. See you guys next time.
Boobs.
It's funny because boobs.
It's funny.